Hi, everybody, and welcome to TNMCoaching Unplugged and Zoran and Todorovic Interconnected podcast. First of all, thank you so much for sharing. Our audience is increasing week by week. We're reaching nearly 20,000 subscribers. We're so grateful for your love, for your partnership, for your friendship, or for you sharing this podcast with your friends, colleagues, and with the family and community. Because of you, we grow, and we're super grateful for you being part of our community. And today, we're going to have wonderful Rohit Maini. He is an award-winning, best-selling leader, podcast host as well. He's a powerful voice of making entrepreneurship more authentic and more accessible to everybody else. He's also hosting his own podcast that you can check, Everyday Empires, when he talks beyond the surface of what does it mean to be an entrepreneur. And he also talks about the truth and unfiltered stories of the leaders who build their strong businesses through perseverance, practical decision making, and change. Beyond podcast, he's also managing director of 2 companies as well. So he's very well versed in the business across industries. What makes him really special and what I love about him and what caught my attention is that he has a deep personal story as well. During pandemic, when he lost his father suddenly, he stepped to lead his family accounting firm. With his unique leadership style, he shaped it into something really super successful as well. So he had real life challenges also along the way. He also has background in corporate finances, so he can bridge this gap between big businesses and small businesses, and how do we create small businesses to be very successful? How do we apply what we learn from the big businesses into the small businesses as well? In our conversation today, we're going to look into breaking boundaries of entrepreneurship. We're going to explore his perspective also on masculinity and leadership in business, and how empathy, authenticity, and collaboration can help us create successful and sustainable businesses, and much more. We're going to just flow. So welcome, Rohit. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. And what an introduction. It's very kind of you.
Sometimes I do this like trumpets and people feel like, oh my God, is it really me? But sometimes it's nice for somebody to tell you about your own accomplishment, right? To hear it like that.
No, that's very kind of you. It's very kind of you.
So let's start with this first, in your own podcast, because I love, that we all podcasting nowadays and we're inspiring people. You focus on these unpolished stories of entrepreneurs. So what inspired you to start this podcast? What is in the essence, the message that you really want to land with entrepreneurs, and why do you feel passionate about it?
Oh, it's such a good question because I found that when I stepped into my father's shoes, almost 5 years ago now, your focus is on being as good an advisor as he was, and making sure you maintain the relationships and you give, in this case, accounting advice, tax advice. And as I found myself giving advice, I could see that some clients were taking that on board and were pushing through and saving tax or making good decisions, and other clients weren't. And I noticed, well, what's the difference here? And the difference is the level of confidence that the clients have in the decisions that they need to make. And for me, I wanted to turn around and say, well, how can I inspire more of my clients to take my advice and execute it? Because of course I can give the best advice in the world, but if they're not going to get up every day and execute it, or make the key decisions they need to make, or follow through with the principles I'm talking about, it's to a very large extent useless. So the way I started to inspire my clients was to talk about other clients or other stories, obviously relatively confidential, but showing them that, in someone round the corner, someone who is in a similar business to yourself, a similar industry to yourself, has done the same thing and has achieved great results. So you can too. And that kind of relatability started to resonate more, and I started to get better results for my clients. And naturally it turned to me thinking, well, what if I can actually explain the whole story on my clients' terms, with a little bit of guidance from myself? And that's where Everyday Empires was sort of seeded, where we bring together, mostly they are my clients. One or two are just inspiring people I meet along the way in my journey, and we go through their story and we really try to pick out exactly what has made them successful. And it's as you say, a raw, unpolished story, because I want them to tell it with warts and all, the challenges they face, but also the rewards that come with being an entrepreneur. And I think the classic image of an entrepreneur and sort of social media is sort of your billionaires and with big numbers and everyone's making millions and it's an amazing status to have. But in reality, it's far from that. And there's a significant amount of work that goes into it. There's probably a lot of luck that happens as well, and there's a lot of failure. And you do need some seriously tough skin. Doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means that it's probably for certain people at a certain time in their life, with certain circumstances going their way. And all those certain things we explore in the podcast, and we try to elaborate as much as we can. So my passion comes from really showing those stories to the world rather than just having my private conversations with clients, that anyone can see these stories. They can challenge them, they can get inspired from them, they can comment on them. And the entrepreneurs that we work with, we are the accountants. We see their numbers, we see all their skeletons, we know where it sits. So the conversation has a level of honesty and authenticity to it that I hope resonates with my audience.
And that's beautiful. I'm so happy that you're mentioning this image nowadays in the social media when all the entrepreneurs are gazillionaires, millionaires, super successful, very balanced, driving fancy car and achieving the success of minimum cost. And I think that this is a myth, that, it has been projected through the social media. And sometimes it feels overwhelming, when you are even thinking about starting business or you are in your business and you're struggling and you're not making these high numbers, that something is wrong, that you're a failure because you're not attaining that image of success that we all see in the news and the social media. And I'm so happy that you're demystifying that, right? That's a really important point to land for people.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And I think for me, it's I get why people do say these things on social media, right? It's about establishing credibility. And if you show that you have expensive sort of material things, then there's an element of one image of a nice watch, a nice car, and, a big house. And everyone goes, oh, well, whatever they say must be fantastic. And you and I both know, you learn more from failure than you do from success. So I'm more interested in people that haven't been successful, because I can guarantee you there'll be more gems and more tips and more guidance that will become a lot more real from those kind of people than those that have the fast cars. And I completely understand, in a world of social media where you are looking for instant kind of messaging and instant kind of credibility to then know where to pay your attention, because you're so bombarded with so much messaging that, yes, it makes sense to sort of look for those things. But a sort of humbly request to the world that it's not like that.
Yeah.
And not saying that you can't listen to people who are, multimillionaires and very successful. Of course, there's that they should be listened to a large extent, but just be wary of their story, be wary of that this is a video and that there are photos and things can be created. And to listen to the advice and whether it resonates with you. And if it does, and you act on it and you make good decisions, you become successful, then all better for it. But if it doesn't resonate with you, feel free to challenge it and to comment and to engage with that community so that you can understand what makes sense for you. And ultimately, that screen and that barrier is helpful to gain inspiration and confidence, but it's your life. It's your decisions that you need to make, and they have to be the right ones for you. So do your research, do your due diligence, and then you can make better decisions for yourself.
Exactly. And for me, when you're talking, what resonates with me from a coaching perspective is that we all have different definition of success. For an entrepreneur who runs small business, making 2 million or 3 million or 500,000 and in turnover might be a sweet spot of their own definition of success, because for them, this is how they feel well within context of their life, their family, their social structure, their free time, their ability to enjoy themselves, instead of the overworking and really crunching the numbers and getting the higher, but then sacrificing your life and everything around you. So I think it's very important for entrepreneurs and for people who are thinking about becoming entrepreneur to really get into that space of fully understanding what defines my success financially, of course, but also holistically in my life. What is that? What does that mean for me? Because we're not all the same, we're all different.
Oh, completely. And my concern is always that success is defined financially. And the problem is that there's always a bigger number. So if you turned over 1 million this year, you can set your target for 2 million next year. But then how satisfying is that to hit it and go on? These are just targets that you set yourself and you can build plans around it. But what's it all for? Is it just to accumulate money, or is it to use that money for other things? And when you find yourself with a little bit of money, you always find that actually you end up using that as a tool to really what your aims are, and digging down underneath and to find out what those aims are. Is, as you say, is it sort of more family focused? Do you want to spend more time with your partner, with your children, if you have any? Is it about traveling? Is it about time freedom, just to be able to do what you want? All those things become possible because you have the resource, the tool of money. So
Exactly.
no one wants to escape from the fact that financial success is important. I think it is something that needs to be highlighted. But if it's the only aim, I find that most of my clients anyway that do have that focus, or that only focus, tend to miss out on all the other things as to why they want to get that money. And often when they take that step back, and of course many of your clients, I'm sure that's what you help them do, they realize that actually there are bigger things at play here, and you can make more concerted, more considered, better decisions over time to achieve those specific goals, rather than just accumulate money.
And in our preparation to this recording, I told you that a lot of the people who are listening to this podcast, they're leaders or corporate employees or people who worked in the bigger organizations and then moving into the small business. Like they finish their corporate career and there is this next natural step. And sometimes there is this nervousness, there is a tension. Can I really make it? What does it mean, for me to go through this transition of belonging to the bigger system, being part of the higher ecosystem into the smaller company as well. And I talk to the leaders and like, I would love to jump and become an entrepreneur. I don't know if I can. I'm overwhelmed. Oh my God, how is it? Can it work? Will it work? So all these like questions, like how would that be? How would that play out? So I personally see that, that being an entrepreneur is like a hero's journey, and you highlighted that, and you beautifully said at the beginning, a lot of the time it's not about success, it's about failure and your ability to rejuvenate yourself and learn from the failure and move forward. So it's a beautiful hero's journey. But what I'm curious about for the people who are in that category, somebody who worked like yourself in a big organization and has a background in corporate and is willing to move into the small business, what would you say to them? What would be not only your advice, but your reflection, like if you were to talk to that specific audience?
Absolutely. I mean, it's the first bit of advice is to take a deep breath. That when you go into these big organizations, I mean, I worked at a very large accounting firm when I was sort of cutting my teeth and getting qualified, and there were tens of thousands of people around the world as part of this organization. So, when the moment that you walk into that door in that office, everything is sort of catered for. You've got your IT systems, your software is all there. You've got a HR team, you've got marketing's also. You don't have to think about any of the things that an SME owner would have to think about. But ultimately, it doesn't mean you can't think about it. It just means that perhaps that isn't your focus. So the first thing is, I always say, take a deep breath and have a plan. Write some things down that make you take the overwhelmingness and put it down on paper, and suddenly things start to digest, and you can take those little steps to achieve what you want to achieve. And for me, getting something down on paper always reduces the level of sort of messiness that's going on in your mind, and you can just put it down and make sure you work through what is a step-by-step plan. The other thing, of course, I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't say this, is to get good people around you. And that doesn't necessarily mean an accountant or a coach. It just means people around you that help you think clearly, that are not yes people, that challenge your business model, challenge the way you're making money, challenge your values, challenge how you're being perceived in the market, that challenge that you're doing what you said you'd go out to do. If you've laid out the best laid plan in the world, but you don't take the first step, then you need someone to give you sometimes a little bit of a nudge. And that's perhaps where someone like yourself or your team is more appropriate. If they're overwhelmed by the numbers, then perhaps they need to focus more on getting a good accountant. If there's a legal issue, just having people around you so that you can pick up the phone and call to create that infrastructure that you may have had when you're in the corporate world is vital. And once you've got these little things in place, then a plan starts to form. And I talk to clients all the time about how they move from sort of either their middle management and they're kind of stuck in their corporate career, and then they decide, okay, do you know what, I'm going to go on my own, or their C-suite executives, they've done brilliantly well, but they, that kind of intense life is not quite right for them now, and they want to slow down and wind down and spend more time with their family, and so they end up starting a small business just to keep things ticking over and pay the bills. But that's not such a simple step. So what I find is these people are brilliant at what they do. They just need to find a way to get to do what they want to do. And all those other little things that they've had done for them, they now need to do. But that's where the outsourcing model works. You find good people in your local network and you bring that into your sphere. But the first things first, take a deep breath. It's not as bad as it seems. It's not as difficult as it seems. Get something down on paper. Have a rough plan. You don't have to write a 100-page business plan, but get something down so that you know broadly where you sit in all the key areas of your business. And then start to bring in people that you think can execute on some of those elements, focus on what you really want to be doing, and crack on.
Exactly. And I would say the same thing to my clients and listeners. Sometimes, creating the success structure around you, it's even more interesting and much more fun than just belonging to a corporate structure, because you get into collaborations, you get into inspirations, you get people who are really willing to work alongside with you. And then the beautiful thing about all of that is it enhances your creative energy, because you need to wear different hats all the time. You need to wear this hat and that hat, and you need to shift. And sometimes when we're in one trajectory, it's good for us to open up into creativity and exploring ourselves in a completely different way. So it's doable. Now, let me ask you kind of a personal question, because I always love asking a little bit more personal. For you, in your own entrepreneurship, in your own life, don't think about your clients, but think about yourself right now. What was the most challenging moment, or what was the most difficult thing that you needed to overcome in your own hero's journey? Something that you can recall or remember and think about, well done. Right? Thanks for overcoming this. This was not easy in my entrepreneurial life. What would you say?
Well, I'll share a very personal story, which, as you mentioned before, I took over Apex Accountancy because my father passed away. And I had known of the business. I'm a chartered accountant myself, of course, but I was following the corporate career. I wasn't sitting in his seat. And I remember my first day very clearly, when I managed to figure out how to open the door. That he had bought this new chair, this sort of very comfortable sort of upscale chair, and it was just sitting in his office, unmade. You had to sort of open up and put it together. And I don't know why, but I just felt that was the first task I should do. It seems easy enough. You open up this box and you put a little chair together, and you put the little cushion on, and then you go. And I realized that he purchased a similar one for my mother at the same time. So this sort of replicate was sitting in my family home. I didn't know, because I wasn't living at the family home at the time. I'd moved out with my wife. And once I put together this chair and I sat down in it, I hated it. I absolutely hated it, because the reason why I was sitting, I mean, it's a very low chair, by the way, but the reason why I was sitting there was because my father had passed, and I just sat there and I thought I'd give up this very comfortable chair and all of this, obviously for him to be around. And that was the hardest thing I've ever had to overcome, because at the time I was forced to do something out of duty, out of my father's legacy, to make sure that his clients were looked after, to look after my family. I was head of the household, so I'm the eldest son. So you assume a level of responsibility that you don't quite appreciate at the time, but there's a lot of raw emotion there. And this was just 2 days after my father had passed. I don't know what compelled me to go to the office, but I was there, and I was putting together his chair, and I was speaking to his clients and picking up the phone, and suddenly you flow with the situation. But you don't have time to process, because you just have to do what you've got to do. And that's by far the hardest thing I've ever had to overcome. And because it was both subconscious and conscious, it was conscious in the sense of I hated being there, but I wanted to push through and do my duty. But subconsciously, I wasn't being allowed to grieve. Wasn't being allowed to step away and just be upset my father had passed. So um, going, when people talk about sort of small businesses and owner managed businesses, your personal life is often drawn into the business because the
Mm,
business is you, and no matter how big it gets, sometimes even there's 100 people as part of your business, if you're the owner manager,
yeah,
it's sometimes if people want to get a hold of you or they want meetings with you, then your personal life is brought into it because it's part
right.
of the business and part of who you are, and that challenge is obviously the separation. So for me, in my journey, overcoming that and trying to make sure that his legacy was looked after, I felt was extremely important, and I had no views of taking it over at the time. You just move from your I was working in Mayfair at the time, move from that sort of nice shiny office into somewhere in West London, and you're talking about really strong issues for his clients and making sure that they are looked after because it's in his name. Over time, I began to love why he was in that position and how he'd set things up and the kind of clients that he had. And I guess I am my father's son in that respect, that I quickly became to enjoy it and develop a passion and appreciate sort of the clients for what they did, and really appreciated my role in their lives.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, on the personal side, it's not often seen, and you can't say that to a client, of course. I mean, they probably feel it,
mm,
um, but at the end of the day, they've hired you to deliver a service, and they're looking for you to do their accounts or give them tax advice or whatever it is. And you've got to do it. And you've got to push through, and you've got to live through your father's legacy because that's what he would have done. And you just hope that you make them proud. And there's always little comments and things that people say, but at the end of the day, if you've got a job to do, you've got to deliver on it. And if you follow through with someone else's word, you've got to deliver on it. So yeah, sometimes the personal matters come through into it, but it's how you deal with that. It's how you
mm,
push through it. Sometimes these obstacles aren't seen by people, but my lovely wife was extremely supportive in that. I had some good friends around me. My younger brother,
mm.
was obviously going through some challenges as well, but he was very supportive, and of course my mother as well. So you have to you have to step up in times like this. And COVID was a challenge, and people did similar things. But it's all part of your journey, and I reflect on that very often, and I still keep that seat to this day. I haven't changed it. Still in we've moved offices now, but it's still there.
Right.
It's still very comfortable. I still don't like it, but I continue to do it because I now enjoy it, and I live through my
Mm.
father.
What a wonderful, wonderful story. Thank you so much for being so authentic and real. And as you were talking, I was thinking you are very unusual because, the stereotype of accountant is that they don't have emotional depth and resilience that you have. They don't have an ability to convey their own emotion with such a depth that you did, and also create relating skills. I had few accountants in my life that I loved because they were similar to you. There was something about them that they were really good with numbers and figures, but they had supreme people skills. So where does this come from in your life? Because how you're conveying yourself and how you lead and how you express yourself, it's really emotionally mature. So is that something that was a gift, or is it something that you developed? How did it play out in your life?
Oh, the two most important women in my life, really. Actually, probably three. Actually, my mother, of course, taught me empathy from
Mm,
a very young age. I think she showed me what it meant to understand another person's position and put yourself in their shoes and appreciate where they're coming from. And she didn't necessarily sit down and teach me that lesson, but it was very much learning by seeing what they're doing. And my mother was a maths teacher, and being able to empathize with students and showing how that she can teach them through their own competencies and skill sets and what's going on in their lives was probably why she was a very good teacher. And so that was my first early side of it. The second is of course my wonderful wife, and she gives me a lot of strong feedback. And I remember when we first started dating,
yeah.
her nickname for me was Robo Rohit. And I'm going, well, I'm not that bad, am I? And then she would show me, like, actually, you have a lot of emotion to express, but why don't you express it? Why don't you talk about it? And I think sometimes as men, we aren't always encouraged to do so. And even I was, as I mentioned, my mother was fantastic at that. But even from my wife's side, I mean, she's extremely expressive, I do have to add. She won't mind me saying that. But you know, she really taught me how to do it and in what way.
Yeah.
And of course, my mother-in-law, who is you know, wonderfully expressive. And what I love about her is that she is always herself. She never manages her personality in front of any other person. You put her in front of a king, you put her in front of of anyone else, and she will be exactly the same. I admire that level of authenticity and honesty, and it's difficult to do. And so, you know, for these three important women in my life, they taught me that you know, from practice, in terms of both my mother's and from my wife in terms of feedback, that it's important to express yourself. And if you don't, then it stays within you, you know, and there's a level of potentially resentment that builds up if you want to express something that's negative or express something that you're not able to, and it just builds up and creates a level of pressure, and sometimes it obviously comes out and bursts and explodes, and you only learn that over time. And don't get me wrong, I've definitely had my fair share of bursts, but at the same time, you come back and go, well, why was I in that position? And you're always in that position because you didn't make, you know, or express yourself a month before, or a week before, or a day before. And so now I've come to a stage where, through many mistakes, that it's important to sit there and just say what you have to say, but you can articulate it. You know, you can spend time thinking about how you're feeling, and then tell someone. Because in the business setting, for example, and I've recently just started a business with my wonderful brother-in-law, where you've got complex points there. I've got my wonderful brother who I want to maintain a relationship with. I've probably got my wife in the middle of that in-law relationship, and then of course we've got business to deliver on, and there's going to be ups and downs on that. But you know, we have to be able to sit down and say, this is how I'm feeling, because I don't like this, or I like this really well. Can we be doing more of this? And as a part of an entrepreneur, you feel very exposed constantly, because you're in so many meetings, you're doing so many things, and decisions are often reflective of who you are as a person. So you have to be expressive. Otherwise, if you're cagey and you don't say how you feel, everyone's left wondering. And so communication, as I'm sure you talk about with a lot of your clients, is ultimate, because everyone needs to know what they're doing. And everyone needs to know why they're doing it. And so if you can develop those skill sets and that level of communication, through that comes a level of emotional communication. And that's where you can practice that. So I just learned over time that, especially with some of the messages I have to deliver, I have to sometimes look a client in the eye and say, you're making bad decisions and you need to make better ones. And if I'm younger than them and I can't express that and can't create that credibility or authority, then they're going to continue to make bad decisions. I need to be able to convince them not to do that. So it's part of my job. And if I don't deliver on it, then it impacts them and their families and other big decisions. So I've been pushed into that position. So, and if you don't mind me saying, but it's through practice. It's through practice.
But it's wonderful how your life orchestrated, you know, the powerful women in your life to really role model, to teach you, to guide you. And I think that, you know, being an entrepreneur, especially if you're a man, as you described beautifully, a lot of pressure, a lot of loneliness, a lot of inability to be fully authentic, a lot of a time when you don't even know what you feel, and you're not in relationship with your feeling. And as you said, entrepreneurs are quite exposed. That's a dark side of that, because they need to go from meeting to meeting to meeting to make decisions on the go, to be able to think things through. So communication becomes vital, and that leads us to what I also love about your work as well, that you bring this perspective on masculinity and leadership in business. We already, you know, talked about it, you know, how empathy, authenticity, and collaboration can reshape the way we lead and who we are. So tell me a little bit more about that, the masculinity and leadership, masculinity and entrepreneurship. What do you want to land with, especially men entrepreneurs who are listening to this, and how can they use their masculine energy to become more balanced, more successful, and well-rounded people?
And I think it's such an important topic, because again, I'm trying to talk more and more about this topic more as a reactive piece to what I'm seeing on social media right now. And sometimes I can be a little bit dismissive, if I'm honest, on what trends are following on social media, because they're behind the screen and you kind of you take it with a pinch of salt. And I can't tell you how many times someone's forwarded me a a TikTok or a reel or something saying this is tax advice, and I go, this is nonsense, obviously. But this one topic kept coming up on masculinity, and a lot of my clients are male. And so this topic comes up, and what I found was actually what I was seeing and hearing in social media and things I was being forwarded was actually starting to translate into real life. And so I thought it was important to actually start to comment on this, because I do that with my clients. And very often, a lot of the topics that people or a lot of the elements of masculine energy that people talk about are now starting to be perceived in a pejorative way. So sort of being strong and being passionate and being firm and being to some extent forthright with what you need to deliver on. These things are starting to be perceived negatively, and I'm sort of going, well, that doesn't quite make sense to me. So what is that? What is creating that? Are those criticisms justified, or is it a way of doing it, or is this messaging being confused? And where I've come to and where I've landed on is that I think that there is a battle kind of between masculine and feminine energy, and I can see why. But for me, I don't see them as sort of opposing elements. I see them as complementary elements, and these are just parts of who we are. And for me, if you're quote unquote masculine, and you want to try to live through those values, that's absolutely fine. But you have to embody that and envelope that with who you're working with and who your clients are and who your employees are and what your values are. Because when you are particularly passionate and you're firm and you can show a level of courage, I wouldn't say that those are all negative things. But for me, if I'm looking at a male entrepreneur and he's talking about sort of putting through sacrifices, so he doesn't want his partner to work and wants her to be at home and live with the kids and look after them, and so all those kind of traditional values that a lot of people talk about, there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But it's how it's articulated from a societal perspective that I think the confusion lies. And your personal preferences and societal preferences do need to be separated. And if you want someone as a partner to deliver on whatever you want to deliver on, then so be it. And very often that classic question comes up because as a businessman, very often you are out trying to run the business, build teams, make the money. And there's a level of busyness which means that you can't commit always to the home, and that's fine, and that's okay. And you can have a partner that perhaps is more willing to commit to the home and more willing to look after children. That's between the two of you. In terms of opining that for society, well, not everyone's an entrepreneur, not everyone has that need or want. And this is a huge topic, of course, but that's one of the biggest topics that I seem to come across, where men are feeling guilty that they're going out and doing all of this, but they also have to be at home because they're being criticized for not spending time at home. And I want society to stay out of that conversation. It's between the two people and their partnership, their marriage, whatever status they're in, and they should be able to decide for themselves without being criticized. But we also talk about that topic from the feminine side, from if they're a businesswoman, how does that work? And I had a wonderful guest on recently called Natalie Kelly, who articulates that beautifully, where she talks about the challenges that she goes through as a businesswoman. And of course, the biggest difference between men and women is, of course, having children and pregnancy and how that works. And she actually started her business when she was pregnant. So all the questions that with her first child, all the questions that she was getting bombarded with was, can you handle this? Can you do this? Men don't go through those questions. Very often it's about a crisis of confidence, and it's not whether you do this. It's it's really difficult. Can you push through this? Can you what emotional energy are you bringing to the table when the chips are down? So there's a real dichotomy of the kind of messaging that's been put out there. And for me, I want to punch through that. And what I want to punch through that with is that don't worry about what's being said on social media. Don't worry about sort of your quote unquote masculine or feminine energy. I think that's the wrong way to necessarily phrase it. I want people to focus on their values and what are they delivering to the market. I want them to focus on delivering, if it's a product or service, it's brought two categories. Are they delivering that in the best possible way? Are their clients happy? If they're building a team, Are they working with you in the best possible environment? Are you delivering on that? These are all very important things for me, because you see that these are the cornerstones of building a great business: having a great team, having great purpose behind your brand and who you are, and having a great product or service that you're delivering on day in and day out. All these other energies on the masculine and feminine, they can come in with your personal life and how you set that up for your own success. And so that's one of my messages. There's many more, if you don't mind me saying, Torin, but for me, it's I want to punch through this a little bit. I want to push aside phrasing it in ways of a sort of dichotomy and sort of battle, and sort of phrasing in ways of how we're all complementary, and how. And Natalie, again, I mean, I'm so grateful for her being a guest on my podcast, because she wonderfully articulates how her and her partner Ryan manage businesses together. And sometimes she comes to the forefront because she's a bit more of a priority. Her businesses are doing well. She needs to spend more time on it. And perhaps Ryan spends more time with the children. And then vice versa, of course. And that's complementary. That sort of partnership, that sort of way of working is fundamental. I don't want to lose that.
Yeah, and I think that for everybody who's listening, that harmony that you're talking about, harmonizing and creating coherence in the masculine feminine relationships and being a choice and prioritizing, it's super important as well. And then also moving away from that, guilt, because I think that a lot of entrepreneurs that I coach, men specifically, feel that obligation, that guilt. They're not spending enough time, but they're not harmonizing the relationship with their wife. Vice versa, I also coach women who are highly driven, who taken, to be breadwinners as well. And they also have this even more. They're having guilt. And I'm like, what kind of mother am I? I don't have enough time to spend with my kids. You know what I mean? I don't have time to dialogue. I don't have time. There's always something. So I think that it's right to emphasize this, as you said, punch through this and make it relevant as the conversation that we have in our families as entrepreneurs, but also in society at large, because sometimes we get polarized in this like dichotomies of masculine and feminine, and we need to get into the harmony. And I love what you said. For me, like you, it's the center, it's values. What do you value, right? Do you have traditional values? Do you really feel that you are an entrepreneur when you want to keep one partner at home and the other partner works? Do you want to work together? You need to come to an agreement, and then also, what is your life purpose? For me, it's it's even bigger question there. What did you come here to accomplish in this lifetime? How would you define your own soul journey, your life purpose as an entrepreneur? So I think if you put values and the purpose in the conversation, then this mix between masculine and feminine gets easier. Once again, I'm so happy that you're talking about it, because the people who are running the businesses, they need to hear that at the level of essence.
Oh, absolutely. And touching on your excellent point about guilt, because that's the word I hear more and more often. What's driving that guilt? And very often it's comparisons with other couples and other societies.
Yeah.
And again, sort of the female guests on my podcast often talk about, motherhood and wanting to be there for their child. And it's often in relation to what they see other mothers doing incredible work, and they're doing obviously a lot more than them. And again, well, am I not as good as them as a mother? Well, hang on a second. You've got a completely different setup to them. So why compare? And when you have a partner in the mix, and what are they doing to contribute to obviously that partnership and raising the child in this case, then you have to have that harmony in that conversation on how you should do it. And when other people look in or comment, to a large extent, it's not, there's not a level of credibility to it, because how you deliver that harmony for your own family is between you two. And seeing how others operate, yes, you can take some guidance, of course, but at the same time, how my wife and I will one day, when we're blessed with children, how we work with raising them will be completely different to most other people, because we have different lives. I run 3 or 4 businesses. My wife is a wonderful lawyer. So there's loads of different things that we need to talk about and think about before we have the child, when Yesha's pregnant, when if we have a second one, obviously the schooling, all those things are going to be challenging conversations. But as you say, what it fundamentally comes back to is the principles and values that we hold, and what do we want to raise our child with. And if we have to take a step back, then we should and prioritize that.
Wonderful. As with all my guests on the podcast, we can talk forever. And one of my podcast guru told me keep the format. So we're coming towards the end, of our conversation today. So let's reflect back a little bit and see how would you like to leave audience with? What do you want to kind of anchor either as a call for action, reflection, something that you really, really want to re-emphasize once again, so we can leave our audience with that flow and wrap.
For me, it's if you're thinking about and becoming an entrepreneur, stop thinking and start doing. Just get on with it. And for me, it's one of the greatest sort of things in my life that I've done, even though I was pushed into that position. To some extent, I inherited a somewhat of a structure. Father ran a small business, and we've built out the infrastructure from there. But so I was thrust into that position, but I'm so happy that I was. And for me, I see so many people hesitating, wondering, thinking, writing amazing business plans. I've seen the best business plans from people who aren't business people. But for me, it's just do something today, right this second. If you're listening right now, finish off, and then write down something that you can do this day that will progress that idea, that will create that business, even if it's to have a conversation with someone else. Because that doing, just that first little step, is what will push you into rolling through and climbing on the other steps. And I see so many times people think about it, they procrastinate, they jump on social media, they find every other excuse than to just do it. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It actually can be wrong. But if you take that first step, you are on that journey. And I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to that are so afraid of that first step. And it is a big first step, even if it's just having a conversation with someone, even if it's about putting an idea out there, even if it's about talking to someone that you probably think won't like your idea, but you want to have that tough conversation to articulate what you're trying to achieve. And the ultimate point is that if you can take that first step, you should always ask yourself, what if this actually comes off? A lot of people talk about failure and sort of, well, it's often when you fail in business, it's a very public failure. People will know about it. If you do something wrong in your job, maybe only a couple of people will know and it's fine. But on that side of things, if you can ask yourself, what if this comes off? What if this actually works? What if my goal is actually achieved? And all the fantastic things that come with it. And you keep your sight of that dream, of that focus, of that goal. And you will achieve it. But you've got to take that first step. And if you don't, then everything else is irrelevant. My takeaway is take that first step, constantly ask yourself, what if this works? And keep doing it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And specifically for the people that we mentioned, some of the corporate employees who are listening to this, and I know there's a lot of our audience comes from the big organizations. And I know that sometimes when you coach in corporate, people are ready to take their next step, they're ready to get into the next phase of their life for many reasons, any reason that might come your way. You've done with this structure, you want to experience something new, you have a passion project that you want to seed, you want to relocate and live a simpler life, as we mentioned. So anything that is coming your way as an inspiration, use this podcast to inspire yourself to make that next step. And of course, as Rohit said, create a support structure around you to help you simulate that structure that you come from, so you can then transition into the entrepreneurship in the best possible way. And for me, see it as a hero's journey. I always speak about hero's journey in entrepreneurship. Our life is one big hero's journey. So all the obstacles of the failures or the successes, it's also part of what makes us human and what we remember as part of our soul journey. So thank you so much for Rohit for coming. It was a lovely conversation. Hopefully we're going to continue next time soon, more in depth, especially when it comes to the masculine and feminine energy and how we cohere that and how do we really bring this into the world of entrepreneurship. Thank you so much for your lovely presence and for your wisdom. I'm fully grateful to have you on this podcast. And everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in. Lovely to hear you, to see you, share, learn, evolve, and enjoy. Thank you once again for tuning in, and bye for now.